Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at MongoDB, ticker symbol MDB. And we're going to be looking at it from a value investing perspective, kind of channeling our inner Warren Buffetts to see if this database platform company is maybe a hidden gem. So to do that, we need to go beyond the hype and really try to understand, their business model, their management team, and of course the financials.
Absolutely. I think value investing is all about, finding the intrinsic worth. And we're not just chasing, short-term trends.
Right.
So let's get back to the basics. What does MongoDB actually do?
Yeah, so they're in the business of data, right? They provide a database platform that has become pretty popular with developers. And what sets them apart, I think, is their focus on this new SQL document-oriented approach.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah.
Unlike traditional databases that use tables and rows,
Right.
MongoDB offers a more flexible way to organize data. And this allows developers to build and modify applications much easier, especially in today's fast-paced world of software development.
Yeah, so they're really appealing to the developers who are building the next generation of apps. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And they've got a range of products catering to different needs, right?
Yeah, they have a good mix.
Yeah.
So their flagship product, MongoDB Atlas,
Right.
is a cloud-based database service that's fully managed. It takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting for users.
Yeah.
C's for those that like to keep their data on their own servers. There's MongoDB Enterprise Advanced.
Okay.
And of course, the MongoDB Community Server, which is free and open source.
I think the free version is such a smart move.
Right.
It's like a gateway drug for developers to kind of get hooked on the MongoDB way of doing things. And then that can potentially lead them to, the paid versions.
Exactly. Yeah. You build a community.
Yeah.
And you create brand loyalty. And speaking of loyalty, I think it's important to assess the leadership behind the company. Would Warren Buffett approve of MongoDB's management team?
That's a great question. So from what I've read, CEO Dev Ittycheria, he seems to have a solid track record. He's been pretty instrumental in guiding the company's growth and making that, that crucial transition to this cloud-first strategy with Atlas.
He certainly seems to have the vision and adaptability, I think, that value investors really look for in a leader.
Right.
And it's not just about, steady growth, but how companies handle, challenges.
Yeah.
That's a really big signal for us as well.
Right. I mean, no company's journey is perfectly smooth. There are always going to be bumps along the road.
Sure.
So MongoDB, they had a security breach back in December 2023. How did they handle that?
I think the response was actually quite positive.
Okay.
They were transparent about the incident, they communicated clearly with customers, and, took proactive steps to strengthen their security measures.
Right.
So that kind of openness and accountability, I think, is a really good sign.
It definitely builds trust.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about something as sensitive as data security.
Absolutely.
Anything else that stands out about their management style?
Yeah, early on, they made a very big and pivotal decision to shift their focus from being a platform as a service to concentrating solely on their database product.
Right.
That took a lot of courage to abandon their initial vision.
Yeah.
But it shows that they're willing to adapt to market realities and prioritize what works best.
I think that's a key trait for any successful company.
Yeah.
But especially in the tech world where things change so rapidly.
Absolutely.
But, even the best management team can't overcome, shaky financials. So let's dive into the numbers here with MongoDB and see if they pass the value investor test.
All right, let's open the books.
Okay.
So MongoDB currently has a market cap of $21.57 billion, which puts them in the large cap category. However, their price-to-earnings ratio is negative.
Negative. That's usually a red flag for investors, isn't it?
It can be, but it's important to look at the context.
Okay.
So in MongoDB's case, the reason their price-to-earnings ratio is negative is because they are currently unprofitable.
Wow.
And this isn't uncommon for high-growth tech companies that are, investing heavily in expansion and R&D.
Right. So the key is to look for signs that they're on a path toward profitability.
Exactly.
So what does their revenue growth look like?
So their revenue is growing at a very healthy clip.
Okay.
In the third quarter of fiscal year 2025, they saw a 22% year-over-year increase.
Wow.
Driven primarily by their Atlas and Enterprise Advanced products.
Okay.
So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that is strong growth. But revenue alone isn't the whole picture, right? So what about their margins and their debt? Are there any concerns there?
Actually, their financials look fairly healthy overall.
Okay.
Their gross margin is a very impressive 74%,
Okay.
which indicates efficient cost management. And their debt-to-equity ratio is a very manageable 0.80.
So they're not over-leveraged? That's good.
Nope.
What about their ability to generate cash from their operations?
They're actually generating positive free cash flow, which is a big plus
Okay.
for a company in their growth phase. This demonstrates that their business model is capable of producing cash, even though they are still investing heavily in expansion.
Okay, so they're not profitable yet, but they're growing revenue, they have healthy margins, manageable debt, and they're generating positive free cash flow.
Yeah, that's right.
Those are all positive signs. But I'm sure there are some concerns too, right?
Of course. I mean, they do have a history of net losses.
Okay.
Which is something value investors, always scrutinize very carefully. And their working capital has fluctuated recently, which could indicate, some inefficiencies in managing their short-term assets and liabilities.
So those are definitely things to keep an eye on. But overall, their financial picture seems pretty decent for a company at their stage. That sounds like they've laid a pretty solid foundation. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground with MongoDB already. Their business model, their management, the financials. Looks like they're in a pretty good spot, but of course we have to consider that market sentiment. Can it really make or break a company?
Yeah, definitely. The market can be fickle, right?
It really can.
And investor sentiment can really have a powerful influence on a company's stock price, regardless of the underlying fundamentals. So what is the market saying about MongoDB?
Yeah, well, their stock has been pretty volatile lately.
Mm-hmm.
We saw, I think it was back in December 2024, their stock plunged almost 28%.
That's right.
What triggered that?
I think there are a couple of factors at play. There were some concerns about slowing revenue growth, and that spooked some investors. And then also the announcement that their CFO was retiring, I think that added a little bit of uncertainty. The market doesn't always respond well to these leadership changes, even if the company's performance is otherwise solid.
So investors can be a little skittish, but despite that dip, it seems like the overall outlook from analysts is still pretty positive.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the average price target from analysts is $374.04.
Okay.
So that suggests that they believe the stock is undervalued at its current price. And I think the recent release of MongoDB 8.0 with its focus on speed and resilience has generated some positive buzz as well.
So it's a mixed bag. There's optimism, but also some concerns about their growth and the leadership transition. What about short interest? Are there a lot of people betting against them?
The short interest in MongoDB is actually relatively low. It's only 2.62% of the outstanding shares. So that suggests that most investors aren't expecting the stock to decline significantly anytime soon.
Interesting. So while some are a little nervous, the majority seem to be holding steady, or even bullish. Now let's talk about ownership. Who actually owns MongoDB? Are we talking institutions, individuals? What's the breakdown?
Yeah, it's heavily weighted towards institutional ownership. 90.9% of the shares are held by institutions.
That's a pretty strong vote of confidence. These are the big players.
It is. It suggests that these professional investors who manage large portfolios see long-term value in MongoDB.
Yeah. What about insider ownership? Are executives and board members, holding on to their shares?
Yeah, insider holdings are a little bit more moderate, around 3.14%.
Okay.
And recent transactions have mainly involved selling activities, which can sometimes be a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah, insider selling can be hard to interpret sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a sign of trouble. But other times it's just, personal financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
What about ownership concentration? Is there a small group of shareholders that have a lot of control?
Yeah. The top 25 shareholders hold over 61% of the company's stock. So that means that a relatively small group of investors could have a significant influence on the company's decisions. And, there's another factor to consider here. MongoDB has a dual-class stock structure.
Oh, right, dual-class stock. Remind me what that means and why it matters to value investors.
Essentially, it means that different classes of shares have different voting rights.
Right.
And in MongoDB's case, the founders and early investors, they hold shares with greater voting power than the regular shareholders.
So even if a large number of individual investors disagree with a particular decision, the founders could potentially overrule them.
Potentially, yeah. So it's something to keep in mind.
Definitely something for value investors to be aware of, because it could potentially limit their influence.
Precisely. I think it's about understanding the power dynamics within a company and how decisions are made. But now, with a good grasp of market sentiment and ownership structure, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about risk assessment.
Sounds good. Every investment has some level of risk, right?
It does.
So let's break down MongoDB's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. What do you think?
Yeah, a SWOT analysis is a great way to kind of get a holistic view of the company.
Yeah.
So let's start with the strengths. MongoDB's platform is flexible and scalable. I think that's a major advantage, right? It allows developers to work quickly and efficiently, which is obviously, very important in today's fast-paced tech world.
So they've got that developer appeal going for them, yeah. And we talked about the strength of their management team, their revenue growth. What else would you consider a key strength?
I think their developer community, it's large, it's active, it's a huge asset. It creates this network effect where more users attract more developers, which leads to more innovation, and a richer ecosystem of tools and resources.
It's like a virtuous cycle.
It is.
It really reinforces their position. But even with all those strengths, there's got to be some areas of vulnerability, right?
Of course, no company is without weaknesses. I think one of the biggest challenges for MongoDB is the intense competition that they face from these giants like Oracle, Microsoft, and these cloud providers.
Right.
These companies have a lot of resources and a very long history in the database market.
That's like David versus Goliath, kind of.
Yeah, it is. They carved out a niche for themselves by focusing on these needs of modern developers. But another potential weakness is that while their platform is very scalable, certain complex data models can pose some challenges.
So they're not a one-size-fits-all.
Exactly. And their reliance on third-party cloud providers for Atlas creates, a little bit of dependency. Any disruption or change in pricing from those providers could really impact their business. And of course, you can't forget about the current unprofitability and the negative ROIC. I mean, those are always concerns for value investors.
Definitely valid concerns. But they've also got to have some exciting opportunities ahead of them as well.
Oh, absolutely. The demand for data management solutions is only going to grow, right? Businesses are digitizing, they're generating more data.
Right.
And then there's AI, there's machine learning. These create new opportunities for MongoDB to kind of expand their offerings and capture more of that market share.
So it sounds like they're in a good position to capitalize on those trends.
Yeah.
But what about threats? What could derail their success?
I think data security is a constant concern. We talked about the security breach that they experienced. Cyber attacks, they're a looming threat, and they have to continually invest in these security measures.
Yeah, super important for any company that deals with sensitive information. What else?
Technology changes really rapidly.
Right.
Customer demands shift. MongoDB needs to stay very agile and very innovative so they don't fall behind. And then there's, data sovereignty laws and regulations.
Right.
It's a complex and evolving landscape. They have to navigate that effectively.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle. And then, of course, you have to always think about what happens if there's an economic downturn.
Absolutely, yeah. If businesses start to tighten their budgets, MongoDB could definitely see a slowdown in growth.
That's right. Economic factors are always a wild card. So not a resounding yes, but not a no either.
Exactly. They have a lot of attractive qualities. They're in a strong position. They've got a talented leadership team. They're operating in a high-growth industry. There's a lot of potential there, but the current unprofitability and the valuation does give us some pause.
So it's like a classic value investor dilemma, right? You have to balance the potential for growth with that need for financial discipline. So if you're holding MDB, it's probably not time to panic and sell, but you definitely want to keep an eye on their progress.
Absolutely. Pay close attention to their path towards profitability, their ability to compete and to capitalize on these opportunities that we talked about. AI, cloud computing, if they can deliver on those fronts, then the long-term value proposition could become even more compelling.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Before you wrap up, you teased earlier that there's a connection between MongoDB and a company in Warren Buffett's portfolio.
Yes.
What is it? So you said there's a connection between MongoDB and a company Warren Buffett holds in his portfolio. What is it?
Yeah, you might be surprised to hear this, but there are some interesting parallels with Apple.
Apple. Okay, I did not see that coming. How so?
Well, think about what both companies have achieved. MongoDB, even though it's relatively young, has established really strong brand recognition among developers. They built a really loyal following based on, the strength of their product, the commitment to innovation.
That does sound familiar, yeah. Apple, they had those diehard fans who loved their user experience and, the design aesthetic of their products. And just like MongoDB, they're known for pushing the boundaries of technology.
Absolutely. And I think both companies have really positioned themselves as industry disruptors. They're challenging the status quo. They're carving out this unique space in the market.
That's a great point. It just goes to show that Even the most, seasoned value investors like Warren Buffett, they recognize the potential of these companies that are disrupting traditional industries.
Exactly, yeah. It's not always about, sticking with what's familiar, what's safe. Sometimes the greatest opportunities are in those companies that are really forging a new path.
So we've taken this deep dive into MongoDB. We've looked at their business, financials, their position in the market, weighed the pros and cons. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners who might be considering adding MongoDB to their watch list?
Yeah, I would say MongoDB is a fascinating company. It's operating in a really dynamic, rapidly evolving industry, and it has a lot of potential, but like any investment, there are risks. So, do your research. Stay informed about the company's progress and be patient. Value investing is definitely a long game.
Excellent advice. And listeners, if you want to learn more, don't forget to check out the links to the sources we used for this deep dive. You can find those in the episode description.
Yeah, and if you're interested in exploring other potential investment opportunities, be sure to check out the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel.
Yeah, we've got tons of videos over there covering all sorts of companies and industries.
Yeah, and while you're there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
That's right.
And leave us a comment letting us know what other stocks you'd like us to analyze. We're always looking for new ideas.
Always.
Now, before we sign off, a quick disclaimer. The research presented today was created with the help of our AI assistant. However, this information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.
Investing always involves risk, so do your own research. Consult with a financial advisor, and make decisions that are right for you.
And with that, we'll say goodbye for now.
Happy investing, everyone!